That's anybody's guess.
Well, I have a letter here dated February 18th, 1947. It says, through the release of atomic energy, our generation has brought into the world the most revolutionary force since prehistoric man's discovery of fire. This basic power cannot be fitted into outmoded concepts of narrow nationalism. There is no secret and there is no defense. There is no possibility of control except through the argued understanding and insistence of the peoples of the world. We scientists recognize our inescapable responsibility to carry to our fellow citizens an understanding of the simple facts of atomic energy and its implications for society. In this lies our only security and our only hope. We believe that an informed citizenry will act for life and not for death. We need $1 million. Please help. Faithfully yours, Albert Einstein.
There are some questions here. In the white.
Given that humanity is the parent of technology and Earth is the mother, is technology going to develop an Oedipus complex?
Does anybody have any comment on that? If not, we will all agree to smile. Larry Greed.
How do you distinguish intelligent machines from spiritual machines? I also have a question for Hans Moravec. In your personal system of ethics, is it possible for a robotic species to have greater ethical values than humans?
I'm just going to read a little bit from an interview with Hans, which I thought was fascinating. The interviewer says, "You seem quite comfortable with your prediction that robots will displace humans from essential roles and eventually that they could displace us from existence. Aren't we talking about the end of the world here? If the world goes on and nobody is here to see it, won't we have failed as a race?" Question. Hans says, he may just want to say this is what I said and agree with himself, but I think it's a fascinating answer. He says, failed as a race implies some external criterion for success. Who knew there was going to be a test? Actually, I don't even consider the majority of organisms that became extinct without leaving any offspring to have failed as species. They also serve who only live and die, and thus map out the unviable portions of the evolutionary landscape and provide a background for the evolution of others. I think the evolution of life is the most interesting thing around and want to see it continue with utmost vigor. Producing artificial offspring that transcend us to the max is the most exalted role I can imagine the human race playing and would be the grandest success possible. On the other hand, if we chose to stagnate, indefinitely circumscribed by our present limitations, then by my standards we would be tragic failures, having turned our back on our potential.
Yeah, well, what can I add? I've forgotten the question, actually.
Ethical.
Oh, ethical. Yeah, I really do think that ethical is not. It's been elevated. It's somehow been made into this Platonic thing. Which I don't think it is. I think it's an evolution. It's a kind of behavior that arose in us primarily because we live in societies, and some of the instincts we have for personal preservation, in fact, hurt the groups that we're part of, and so we're taught to not behave that way because. First of all, it'll be bad for us in the long run, but at very least it's going to piss off a lot of other people. And then they'll probably not cooperate with us and so on. And we've initially used those kinds of behaviors primarily in the context of tribal villages of a couple of hundred people. And with the advent of civilization, we've had to become very conscious of what we were doing. We could go by instinct in the tribal village, but when we lived in societies of thousands of people and now millions, the instincts are just not adequate anymore. So there has to be a set of taught rules. So I don't think it's a coincidence that the Code of Hammurabi and the Ten Commandments, all appeared about 10,000 years ago at the beginning of us living in much larger communities than our instincts were tuned for. So So I think something like that makes sense in a larger scale when we have super intelligences and lots more of them and greater variety. But we'll have to work out what the rules are then.
I do think that what we're talking about is the next step in evolution. I think as we go to 2030, 2040, when you meet a biological human, there will be some non-biological processes going on in their brain. That's already true of some humans today, Parkinson's patients with that implant, and I have a deaf friend who's profoundly deaf, has a cochlear implant, and so on. These are early primitive steps. But 30, 40 years from now, it'll be typical when you meet a biological human. There'll be some non-biological thinking processes going on in their brains. If you look at those charts earlier, biological thinking is maxed out at 10 to the 26 calculations per second for the human race, biologically speaking. The non-biological portion of our thinking is growing exponentially. By the end of the century, it'll be far more powerful than the biological part. That is, in my view, the next step in evolution, but I don't view that as not human. I don't see that as a successor. I don't think there's going to be a clear distinction between human and non-human intelligence. We're not going to say, okay, humans on the left side of the room, machines on the right side of the room. There's not going to be a clear distinction. We're going to have biological humans who have very powerful non-biological processes going on in their brains and bodies. We're going to have non-biological entities that are derived from human intelligence in a whole variety of ways, which will have human characteristics. On the issue of spiritual, what my book literally says is that we will meet entities. I use spiritual primarily to mean conscious, because I think that is the essence of spiritual value, to really have feelings and be aware of them. We will meet entities that appear to be conscious, and most humans will be so convinced by their behavior and the subtlety and richness and their emotional reactions that they will believe that they're conscious. And these machines will get mad at us if we don't believe them. But that's not a rigorous philosophical or scientific proof that these entities are conscious. And there'll be philosophers who say, well, no, they don't squirt neurotransmitters, so they can't be conscious. And they're not based on DNA-guided protein synthesis, and you can't be conscious unless you are. And fundamentally, there is no objective test to subjective experience. It comes down to the nature of those concepts.
Artificial intelligence, spirituality in several traditions involves involves a physical practice, and I wonder how artificial intelligences and spiritual artificial intelligence would exist, or can spirituality exist only in the mind, not in the body, and how would an artificial intelligence or a spiritual artificial intelligence relate to the idea of the body, and how does the body figure into all of this?
Well, they'll go to their virtual house of worship of their choice.
I think that's a very serious question, the question about bodies. I may maybe try to expand on it a little bit, because it becomes such a dominant theme towards the end of both Hans's and Ray's books, namely the idea, in some sense, of people uploading their brains into some kind of medium in which those intelligences can interact more intimately than they can through, let's say, just ordinary language, and in which personalities, individuals start to blur more and more, because in essence, because of the lack of the constraints of bodies, also the lack of mortal bodies, and so the question is, what is intelligence, if it's going to happen, going to be like? What is existence going to be like? Consciousness, awareness, when individual boundaries start to cease to exist, and then perhaps completely cease to exist, and when mortality ceases to exist, all of which are very far-fetched ideas, being that they are